All right, guys, it's me, Hunter here, and I am super excited to kind of tell you about a really cool thing that happened not recently. It was actually about a year ago, but it's been something that I've been thinking about a pretty good bit. I'm, of course, a writer. I like writing stories, and I do have a book out. It's called The Broken World, and I'm super excited about it. I'm just so pleased to have it out into the world. I do hope you go check it out. But science fiction, fantasy, all of that's kind of my jam. And it's been my jam for as long as I can remember. And so when it comes to publishing and writing, I'm always really interested in kind of what the sci-fi fantasy space is currently doing, and where it's going. And throughout my time as a writer, as an aspiring, author, one of the things I've always struggled with is where are books, where are they kind of in the world as in terms of popularity? I'm always feeling like if I wanted to write books, I should have been born like 100 years ago, or maybe even not that long ago. Kind of like the time of Harry Potter. Was a really big, book boom, and everybody. It feels like kind of growing up, everybody loved to read, and now it's very difficult to find people who enjoy reading as much as I do. And even I myself, am maybe not reading as much as I used to, because I just used to read nonstop. And so, as time changes, as we change, audiobooks are a really big thing right now. And that's where I consume most of my media content, even over like TV and movies. I'm more often listening to books or podcasts, things like that. And so I'm always really excited to find out, new things like that, and maybe how I can take my writing and import that, into a new medium. But when it comes down to it, a good book, something that I can hold in my hands, that has always kind of been the dream. And I was planning on publishing my books, for a long time. I'd always wanted to do that, but behind that want, there was always that feeling of, books feel like they're going out of style. Books feel like they're just not, what they used to be. People don't read anymore. This endeavor, this dream that you have. It's a worthwhile endeavor, but it just may be that you're disappointed with the result, that people don't like to read as much as they used to, and what you're hoping to obtain from this is probably not very realistic. And that's when I encountered Brandon Sanderson. If you're not familiar with Brandon Sanderson, I would, especially if you're like a sci-fi fantasy person, I would recommend that you get very, very familiar with Brandon Sanderson. Not only has he become one of my most favorite writers, one of my most favorite Mormons, and I don't have many of those, but he's just a really cool guy. I haven't met him personally. He's kind of like my online mentor, if you will. And so learning from Brandon Sanderson through his YouTube videos and his podcast has been really, really incredible. He seems to be a very intelligent, very amazing writer. His books I do really enjoy. He is not, honestly, he's just not my favorite. There are some other writers that I think I just vibe with the style a little bit more. But Brandon Sanderson is, I would consider, one of the biggest fantasy sci-fi writers out there of our current time. And I think that he's only going to get bigger. And anyway, the point that I'm trying to get to is about a year ago, he released a video saying it's time to come clean. Okay, kind of like an apology video sort of thing. It was really funny because he wasn't really apologizing, because what he was breaking the news that he had written 5 extra novels, and he had done that. I'll link the video down. You can see that for yourself. But what happened was he was kind of in that COVID timeframe, and so a lot of travel, a lot of things like book signings, stuff like that was shut down. And so in his free time, he wrote 5 extra books. Okay. Like he was already on the hook for writing for tours, the publishers, and he had some things lined up that he needed to finish, but he just said, "Hey, I'll just write 5 extra novels." And again, once you look into Brandon Sanderson, you realize that he doesn't write anything under like 500,000 words. The dude's a monster, okay, and everybody in the writing community like loves slash hates him because he is just such a prolific guy. Anyway, it's really amazing. And so, kind of, where I come into the story is I have been, watching some of his videos, trying to learn from him as much as I can. And I really respect him as a writer and as one of the biggest writers, like going right now. I mean, I just think, kind of as far as popularity goes in the science fiction fantasy space, I don't know of anybody that's got more of like a media writing, fan presence as Sanderson. And so, anyway, what he wanted to do with these 5 extra novels is self-publish them. And so, to me, when I heard that, I was like, "Whoa, that's kind of crazy," because we have one of the biggest writers going right now, and he's wanting to self-publish. And he's wanting to self-publish for a lot of the reasons that I was wanting to self-publish. Now, when I say that he was planning on self-publishing, I just mean that just that, like these 5 extra books, he's going to self-publish himself. He's still going to work with, companies and publishers. He's not going the full-time self-publishing route. But for somebody, of his caliber, if you will, to see him decide to take that self-publishing step, I think is a huge deal for self-publishing. And I wonder if we're going to see more, big name traditional people kind of step into that space. And so what he wanted to do with these 4 extra books, and again, you can watch the video, kind of go all the way through it. But he wanted to basically make a year out of it called the Year of Sanderson, which is this year, as you're watching this video, 2023. And so every couple of months, he is basically, mailing out like a subscription box, if you will, but it comes out, every 3 or 4 months, so that, throughout the course of one year, you get 4 books. And you get like a T-shirt and mug stickers, whatever comes with the box, right? And the difference here, when I think of self-publishing, I think of, maybe going on Amazon, and throwing it on there. Well, he has, the ability and he has the fan base to actually to do that over Kickstarter, right? And I thought that was a very interesting choice because I was not too familiar with the idea of a self-publishing system through Kickstarter. Now, again, Kickstarter is not the same as Amazon or Ingram Spark, but when you're somebody like Sanderson and you know that you're probably going to sell a few copies, you can do it through Kickstarter, kind of buy in bulk, the books and then mail those out. So makes sense. It's a really good idea, right? Well, I was very interested in this, and so I was keeping a lot of close eye on things. And when I saw that the Kickstarter was going live, I was watching his YouTube channel, and I think that I caught the video. It's the video kind of announcing the Kickstarter, announcing that the Kickstarter is open. And so I saw that, and when I saw that, I was like, I think it was like an hour after it had released. It wasn't like immediately after, but it was pretty close. And so I went over to the Kickstarter because I wanted to see I wanted to see how it was going. I wanted to see that people were excited and that people were interested. And when I got to the Kickstarter, I think the goal was $1 million. So he wanted to reach $1 million. And $1 million, that's a lot of money. Okay, when I think about even my own book, which cost me significantly more than I would say most first-time authors. Um, I would say that even that's not, that's a lot for self-publishing, right? Because again, we're used to like the Ingram Spark, Amazon idea, but he was kind of doing something different. Has a fan base to do that with. Anyway. When I go to Kickstarter, again, this was like an hour after the announcement video. And so I went to Kickstarter. The goal was $1 million. And I think that when I got on there and I saw it, it was at around $30,000. Now, for anybody like me, you're looking at that, you're going like, whoa, $30,000. That's a lot of money. And indeed, sir or ma'am, it is a lot of money. Okay. That's about what I make in a year. But for the goal of 1 million, right? Versus like $30,000, you're nowhere close, right? You're nowhere close. Especially knowing, who Brandon Sanderson is, and knowing that he has tons and tons of fans. To see that his self-publishing venture, if you will, was kind of resulting in what felt to me like a failure, actually put me in a very bad headspace. When I saw that, I was actually feeling very, very down. I was like, oh my goodness, how is it possible, that one of the biggest writers of our time in the science fiction fantasy space, how is it that they can do this amazing announcement, write 4 extra books, kind of on the side in secret, reveal it to everybody, and then, have a goal of like $1 million, which somebody like him should be able to make, and then only, in the first couple of hours, only reach around $30,000. I remember for the next 2 or 3 days, I was genuinely disappointed. Not in Sanderson or whatnot, but just in what I felt like was the state of publishing. And I was very disappointed in kind of my own work and where I was at. Because see, I'm not Brandon Sanderson, right? I'm just a small guy. I've got one book, and half a podcast. Throwing that out there. I'm trying to get out there as best as I can. But when I saw that, I was like, man, this is not a good sign. This is not looking great. And I genuinely, I couldn't write. I couldn't do anything. I was a robot at work. I think that was genuinely probably as sad and unhappy as I've ever been, because I was on the cusp of wanting to release my own story. And I know I was looking at that video and looking at the results, of his Kickstarter, and thinking to myself, there's no way that I'll ever make it. I'm going to have to really rethink how I feel about writing, how I feel about my work and my art, and having to do something like that. And so it was really a moment for me, that just wasn't great. I was not feeling good, in any capacity about any of that. And so fast forward like a week, 2 weeks, and I ended up coming back to the Kickstarter because, some time had passed. When I first looked at it, we're talking about, it had been, the first, 9 hours, 10 hours that the Kickstarter had been out. And so then I come back to it, and I'm looking at it 2 weeks later. I think that's exactly what it was, around 2 weeks. And I was blown away because the goal for Brandon Sanderson's Kickstarter was $1 million. Okay, which I didn't think he was going to make, honestly. When all was said and done, when the dust settled, his Kickstarter finished out at $41,000,000, $754,153. I don't know if I said that right, but it was $42 million. Okay, $42 million. For book sales, like, I'm not in the traditional space. I don't know, what book. I'm sure if, Martin, George R. R. Martin, or some of those guys, if, J.K. Rowling released another Harry Potter, I'm sure, there it would be a multi-million-dollar book sale. But to self-publish, 4 books in a subscription-like way for $42 million, I don't personally, I don't think that happens. That is an absolute game changer, on every possible level. I don't think that publishing companies were expecting it. I don't think that Brandon was expecting it. I for sure was not expecting it. And so when I saw that, I was absolutely blown away, because what that means is that people do love books. And more importantly than maybe the medium, people love good stories. And Brandon Sanderson tells very good stories. And one of the cool things that he did with that, is that any other, publishing Kickstarter that was on, Kickstarter at the time, because Brandon and the crew like made so much money, they then backed and kickstarted like every other publishing Kickstarter on Kickstarter. Like that is insane. Like you made so much money that you can just like fulfill all the other Kickstarters out there for publishing and for writing. What an amazing thing to do, and kind of be considerate of other people out there kind of in the space. Because $41 million, dude, that's mind boggling. And so I made a very big U-turn because I was genuinely kind of upset. I was sad at kind of where things were, how I felt, about writing and people who like to read. Because everybody I talk to at work, everybody that I meet, very, very few people that are like, oh yeah, I read all the time. I love reading, you know? And to see that, $42 million, dollars, I think it ended up being almost 200,000 people that donated to that Kickstarter. And so far, the Kickstarter's had some bumps in the road because they can't like get the books printed fast enough. Like that has been their only issue, right? Is that they have so many people wanting these books, that the publishers that they've been working with have just had a difficult time kind of printing all of the books necessary to meet their requirements. So it has been absolutely amazing. And so that's, an experience that I had that kind of happened, last year. And so when I decided to publish my book, in part it was due to what Brandon Sanderson was able to do. Seeing what happened on this Kickstarter made me say to myself, you know what? If not now, then when? If I don't publish this book now, then I'm always going to be worried about it. I'm always going to be thinking about what if, what if, what if. People don't like to read. No, no, no. Okay. If you want a sign from God, okay, or the coolest Mormon on the internet, okay, if you want a sign from those guys, like that's it. Okay. And so that's why in April of this year, I was like, I've got to get my story out there because, even though not many people know who I am, I've got, really great support from my friends and family, but in terms of like internet reach and people like, oh, Hunter Johnson, like nobody, nobody knows, nobody cares. But the hope is that there are people out there who like to read. And if I tell, some good stories, decent stories, and throw in some donuts and dust bunnies and bonus features, people will be interested. There are those people out there. And so whenever I'm writing, whenever I'm, working on, projects and things, I think to myself, if I'm ever kind of like in a down headspace, and I'm not, feeling motivated or whatever, I'm like, man, people do love to read. People do love good stories. And I think definitely with the writer strikes that are going on right now, I think people are beginning to realize that writing is such an integral part of our society, not just in books, not just in podcasts, but in audio fiction, in movies and TV. And what we're seeing right now, kind of like in the movie space, is that movies actually suck without good writing, right? Like movies aren't good without good writing, and so it's something that really goes hand in hand. And so the more that you kind of look at it that way, I think the more kind of inspired and motivated that I have been. So again, if you're not familiar with who Brandon Sanderson is, I would highly recommend looking into him and kind of studying what he does, because it's really amazing. And I'll put some links down to the Kickstarter. It's already come and gone. This was like a year ago. I know I'm like so late to the game, that it's not even funny. But to say that what happened then is not inspiring to me would be false. I mean, I think about that moment all the time because it was a victory for him. But I think it's also a victory for all of us who enjoy writing, who enjoy art, and who want to get into the publishing space. Now, I don't say all of this to make you think that if you started a Kickstarter, put up a Ko-fi, that you're going to make $42 million, right? Because you're not. You're absolutely not, unless you're Brandon Sanderson. All right, he's got hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of fans. And so he definitely has a platform by which to jump off of, right? So he, these millions of fans are not brand new. They don't not know who he is. They know exactly who he is. They know what they're going to get, which is good quality work, and so they have no problem whatsoever backing him and doing that. For somebody like me, I'd be lucky to get $30. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's just the nature and that's just the reality. But there's also a level to it that to visually, tangibly see that people do love reading, and especially in the science fiction and fantasy space. I feel like a lot of writing spaces are kind of more geared toward or taken over by, shapeshifter romance, or things like that. I'm not against shapeshifter romance, but if you go on any, like Wattpad, or you go on Tapastic, or things like that, you're going to be, look at like what is trending and what's popular. It's almost always some kind of romance, which again I'm not against. But if you're in the sci-fi, like I want to read about swords, and little goblins, that's going to be much further down the list. But to see that, science fiction, fantasy, the things that I really love and the things that I enjoy, have a place in the world. Um, and I now feel like I have a place, a part on the bookshelf, to put my stories. So I hope that you guys, thought that was cool. And I want to try and keep up better with news about writing and publishing, because I think some amazing things really are coming our way, in terms of like self-publishing and writing, and how we as self-published authors can move forward in this space. So hope you guys have a great day, night, or otherwise. If you're stuck in the twilight zone, wish you luck there. Good luck. But thank you guys for watching. Really appreciate it. See you guys later.